Hey, it's Oz here, and in this quick video, I'm going to tell you all I know about the GDPR, that is the General Data Protection Regulation, which comes into effect on the 25th of May. And if you're watching this video at a later date, then it doesn't matter because it still applies. If you have a website or a blog or an e-commerce store, then this affects you. Even if you're outside of the EU, no matter where you are, you need to understand the GDPR or you could be in a lot of trouble. So strap in and let's find out what it's all about. Okay, so the GDPR is really the new Data Protection Act. Now you may be thinking, well, I thought we already had a Data Protection Act. Well, we did. But the problem is that the original Data Protection Act was drawn before the web was a thing. So it doesn't really cover web users. This means that companies could, for example, collect your data and sell it on. If you've ever subscribed to something or you've opted into something or you've bought something and next minute you're getting bombarded with emails from companies you've never heard of offering you similar things or even different things, then that probably is the result of somebody selling your data or sharing your data. So as you can imagine, some very big companies made a lot of money selling data, and that's what the GDPR is going to stop. Now, before you say yay, the bad news is that the GDPR affects not just big corporates, but also us. Basically anybody with a website, a blog, or an online store, particularly if you collect user data. Now, you may be thinking, well, I don't collect user data. If you're using, for example, tracking tools like Google Analytics or the Facebook Pixel, then you are collecting user data. If you're selling something online, when people go through your checkout, if they're leaving their details with you, then you're storing user data. If you're trying to build a subscriber list and you're offering something in exchange for an email, then you're collecting user data. Okay, so let's break down what it is that you really need to understand about the GDPR. Really, it's about transparency. You need to be transparent with your website visitors. You need to tell them what data you're collecting from them, why you're collecting this data, and what you plan to do with that data. You also need to allow them to request that data or to edit the data that you hold on them or even delete. It's called the right to be forgotten. You may remember that a few years ago, some people who were deleting their Facebook accounts discovered their images and their data being used by Facebook without their consent. And it turned out that the small print said something along the lines of whatever you post in Facebook belongs to Facebook. And that's the kind of thing that you can do when the Data Protection Act doesn't cover those areas. But now it does. So if you're a company that collects a lot of user data, then you need to designate one person as a data controller, and that person becomes the person in charge of everything to do with privacy. The downside of that, of course, is that if you're a one-person blogger or a website or a very small tiny business and you're also collecting user data, the GDPR still applies to you. So a user, for example, or a website visitor could demand the data from you, and you need to be able to provide it. Otherwise, you could be in serious trouble. Now, the GDPR is actually coming from the EU, but if you're in the US or anywhere outside of the EU, it still affects you because the legislation covers every EU citizen regardless of where they are. And I get it if you're outside of the EU and you're thinking, hey, I don't give a hoot about this. What are they going to do? Are they going to knock on my door and sue me? And I can see the point because you'd think that the EU really have bigger fish to fry. But I'm probably not the first person to mention that the US will probably follow suit very quickly, and other countries maybe, and they'll update the Data Protection Act in accordance. Now, on that note, two companies, Honda UK and Flybe, have already been sued by the ICO, who looks after data protection and privacy in the UK. Allegedly, what happened is that these companies contacted their subscribers just to prepare for GDPR, and they basically said, hey, we just want to make sure that you're happy to receive our emails. If you want to stay on our mailing list, then please click this link, and if you don't, then don't. And for that, they got fined collectively £83,000, which is over $100,000. Now, you may think that's crazy, and I think so too. The irony, of course, is that in legal terms, these companies admitted that they didn't have the consent of their users to send them emails by the sheer fact that they asked them to opt in again. Now, these companies tried to defend themselves by saying, well, this wasn't a marketing email. It was a customer support email. But the ICO said it was a marketing email, even if nothing was being marketed. Apparently, if you send something for free, that's also a marketing email. Yes, I know what you're thinking. It all stinks. But what can you do? My point is, with this kind of stuff going on, do you really want to be in breach of the GDPR? I think it's easier not to be in breach of it. So the next question is, what can you actually do? How on earth are you going to give a user access to their data? Well, the good news is that if you're using WordPress, then there are already some plugins that are starting to appear that are GDPR specific plugins, and I'll have another video coming up soon talking about those plugins, so make sure you subscribe to this channel and keep an eye out for that video. Also, WordPress are working hard to bring out a new release that has GDPR incorporated into the core, and I don't know what that's going to look like just yet, but I believe that you'll be able to enable users to actually check out their data, whatever data you hold on them. For example, if people leave blog comments on your blog, then you're holding their email address typically and their IP address. And these are two things that the GDPR says are pieces of identifiable data. So with this new functionality, users will actually be able to request and download their data, and also, I believe, edit their data and even delete it themselves. Now, on that note, there are plugin developers already working hard to provide similar functionality if their plugins collect data. So let's touch briefly on the areas that you need to really think about when it comes to the GDPR. If you use contact forms where you're collecting email addresses, perhaps telephone numbers and names, then you need to perhaps have some kind of notice in there that says you are consenting to me holding this information. Preferably, you'll have a checkbox for them to check. If you have a lead magnet or an offer, or you're asking people to subscribe to your list, then that also needs to come with a big disclaimer. Now, one big issue with the GDPR is if you hold data on the actual server, and some contact forms in WordPress do exactly that, as well as some opt-in plugins. When somebody opts in or somebody sends you a submission via a contact form, their data is actually on the server, and you can tell this because you can see the messages or the submissions on your WordPress dashboard. That means that it's stored in the database, and that's one thing you need to be careful of, because you need to enable users to be able to access that information that you're storing on them, which means that you really need to be good at backing up, make sure that you don't screw that up. And you need to be using GDPR compliant software or plugins or systems that enable users to be able to do this. Now, if you don't want the hassle, one way around this may be to remove your contact form and just have an email address and say, if you want to get in touch with me, then email me at that email address. And by the way, let me point out here, as if you didn't know, that I'm not a lawyer, I'm a blogger. So all this I'm telling you is not legal advice. Do not go away after watching this video thinking that you know everything about the GDPR. I'm going to leave some links in the description below this video to different GDPR resources just to help you do your own due diligence. I'm just sharing what I know, what I've been able to find out thus far, and I'm going to throw in an interesting fact at the end of this video. So, as I understand it, it's better not to hold data on the server if you can. If you run a forum or any type of online meeting place or a membership site, then you really do need to be GDPR compliant and enable users to access their data. Other things you may need to be aware of are things like SSL. You should really be running SSL, because not running SSL means that you're not encrypting the connection, the data between the visitor's computer and your website. And that could mean that you're breaching the GDPR. And on the subject of lead magnets, and this is particularly important for bloggers and internet marketers, you can no longer get away with offering a lead magnet and then marketing to that person. You can't say, type in your email here and get this cool free download or this report or this PDF, and then claim that as a subscriber. And this is because technically that user did not agree to be on your mailing list. All they did was agree to the free download that you were giving away. Now, of course, the other side of the coin is that no one wants to give away their content for free. Come on. But to be compliant with the GDPR, you have to keep both things separate. So the way around this, in my opinion, would be to offer the lead magnet and have a checkbox that says, check this if you would also like to be on my mailing list so that I can send you more useful content and marketing promotions. And if you're thinking that your conversions are going to tank, then you're probably right. And the worst part of it, of course, is knowing that many people will just pop in their email address to get that freebie without any intention of ever wanting to hear from you again. So I'm not sure how that's going to go, but that's the way it's going to be played now. Which brings me to the last thing that I want to mention, which is the quirky, interesting thing. And that is that although we have to be compliant with the GDPR, the rules are a little bit wishy-washy. Any lawyer will tell you that law is shaped by lawsuits, which really means that somebody needs to get sued for the court or the judge to set a precedence. And only then definitions will start to take meaning. So, in summary, the GDPR is the new updated Data Protection Act, which actually covers website users. To be compliant with the GDPR, if you run a blog or a website of any type, at the very least, you need to be 100% transparent with your website visitors if you collect data from them. You need to let them know what it is you're collecting, why you're collecting this, and what you plan to do with it. You also need to be able to give them access to your data, particularly if you store it on the server, and the ability to edit and even delete it. It is down to you to make sure that all the tools you're using and all the plugins and all the software is actually GDPR compliant. And lastly, somebody somewhere is probably going to get sued, and we're all going to learn a little bit more about GDPR. Okay, I'm going to put a few links in the description below this video. One of them is going to be to a GDPR checklist. How cool is that? That's going to save you a ton of time and possibly a ton of stress. I'm also going to add a link to my post on GDPR where you can find a lot more information that I've gone into in this video and anything else that I think may be useful. Okay, so I hope you're now a little bit more clear about GDPR than you were at the beginning of this video. If you are, please give me a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to the channel, and that way you can keep up to date with all this content. Thank you for watching, and I shall catch you in the next video.